Welcome to the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF podcast, the show that unites leading voices in philanthropy, finance, and nonprofit strategy to help donors, their advisors, and the charities they support thrive. Your host today is Ted Hart, one of the foremost nonprofit thought leaders and the author of the DAF Revolution, making a difference in our modern world. Each episode features top experts sharing insider tips and real-world strategies in a lively conversational style, whether you're seasoned in the sector or just starting out. Ted lectures around the world, and now he's here for you. Here's Ted Hart.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF. I'm your host, Ted Hart, and today we're joined by a guest who is redefining what charitable giving looks like in the modern age. Adam Nash is a co-founder and CEO of DAFI.org, short for Donor Advised Fund for You. DAFI was named one of Fast Company's most innovative companies in 2024 and is on a mission to help people be more generous more often. Adam brings with him an extraordinary background as an executive, investor, and educator. Adam has served as an executive angel investor and advisor to some of the most successful technology companies to come out of Silicon Valley, with leadership roles at Wealthfront, Dropbox, LinkedIn, and eBay. And he's also a lecturer at Stanford University, where he teaches personal finance for engineers. Adam holds advanced degrees from Stanford University and Harvard. And most importantly, Adam, welcome here to the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF.
Oh, Ted, thank you for the kind words. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here. And Adam, you've referred to DAFI as a modern donor advised fund with a simple mission to help people be more generous more often. Can you tell us how you're meeting that mission?
Yeah, it's really quite simple. And it actually is grounded in what we now know to be true about behavioral finance, is that actually planning for almost any financial goal is difficult when every time you're asked for an expense, you have to reach in your pocket and figure out how much money you have. I mean, it's true for retirement savings. It's true for saving for college. And it turns out the research shows it's the same for giving. And so from our perspective, this basic, simple, old-fashioned idea of putting money aside for charity when you have it, when it's convenient for you, and then having that money available to you whenever you're inspired to give is really at the heart of what we built at DAFI. And we believe that the Donor Advised Fund is the right type of account, the right structure for everyone who gives to put money aside for charity.
Yeah, let's go right to that, because you've made that as a very bold statement. You said everyone who gives should have a DAF. Why do you believe that? And why do you think most people need to know, or what do you think most people need to know about a donor advised fund that maybe they don't?
Well, listen, I think there's two ways to look at this. You can look at it from the point of view of the individual, of someone like you or me who believes in giving. For us, having an account, a separate account for something as important as giving is just irreplaceable, right? That ability to put money aside when it's convenient for you is a very big deal. I mean, let's be honest, for most people in the US today, their income is variable, right? Some years you have great years and some years not so good years. But most of us don't want our giving to go up and down based on the specifics of our work or our life, right? You know, a lot of people give to their church, their synagogue, they give to their alma mater, they give to causes they care about. They want to be able to support them on an ongoing basis. It feels bad to not have the money to give when you want to give. I mean, especially in a crisis. And so putting money aside in a donor advised fund, if you care about giving, is just incredibly important for the fulfillment, for the part of our lives that giving fills. But I would say overall, the research is pretty specific about the fact that if you set a goal for your giving, right, if you pre-commit, people who do that give about 32% more. So if you care about philanthropy and you care about giving in the United States, I mean, you and I both know giving is a very large part of the economy. You know, Americans give generously. I think the last number I saw was over $500 billion a year going to charity. And I know it sounds crazy, but the truth is we believe that if more people put money aside proactively in an account like a donor advised fund for charity, as big as that is, it could be trillions of dollars more in the coming decades. And we think there's a lot of organizations and causes that need that support.
Well, they sure do. Adam, the other thing that appears to be true is that, when people are thinking of giving isn't necessarily the time that they have to also choose where they want that money to go. So separating those two decisions makes a lot of sense for folks and makes it easier for them to give.
That's exactly right. I mean, you've got a number of things going on here that don't always line up. I already talked about the fact that, in our working lives with income, we really do have different stresses and strains. I mean, as you mentioned, I do teach personal finance. Sometimes there's unexpected expenses that come up, right? Sometimes your income fluctuates or you're changing jobs or something's going on with your family. And so having a separate account for giving really helps with those set of problems. But like I said, the organizations themselves really want consistent support. I think there's this misperception out there that somehow the magic for a nonprofit is getting one giant check. And don't get me wrong, I know that a lot of organizations would appreciate a giant check, so I realize it's there. But most organizations, they have people who work for them. Their cause, their mission isn't something they're just doing this year. They're doing it every year on an ongoing basis. And having a donor advised fund means that you have the wherewithal to support them regardless of what's going on in your personal financial life. And so I think that there's this misperception out there that donor advised funds are something that only the wealthy do. I do know that an increasing number of wealthy individuals do use donor advised funds because they're incredibly flexible, incredibly powerful, and make a lot of sense from a personal finance standpoint. But just like retirement accounts, I know there's billionaires out there who have giant retirement accounts, giant IRAs. But the truth is, having a separate account for retirement makes a lot of sense for most people. And the same thing applies for giving.
Yeah, putting some money aside so you can give that away in your retirement years. You had mentioned sort of that one big check, and of course, no charity would be shy and say, "Don't send me one big check." But the IRS also requires charities to be able to pass a public support test. And having many donors and many DAF advisors giving to you helps you meet that standard from the IRS as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I think that more and more organizations are realizing that their supporters who have donor advised funds can be more consistent supporters, right? Setting up that recurring donation. I mean, for the individual, I mean, a lot of people love Daffy just because it's a better system for giving, right? When you have money to put aside for charity, it makes it easy to do so. It can be cash, it can be stock, it could be crypto, it can be almost anything. And then when you want to give, answering those simple questions of, wait, where are my tax receipts? How much did I give to that organization last year? Setting up a recurring donation so that every year you're supporting your kid's school or your alma mater or the cause you believe in. It turns out it's very useful to just have one place for all your giving.
Yeah, it's sort of like having a philanthropic secretary available to you without having to pay their salary. Adam, you and I had the opportunity to sit down and have a really in-depth conversation. I want to thank you for that. I'm honored to include you and your insights in the new book, The DAF Revolution, Making a Difference in Our Modern World. In that book, you say generational giving is more than a financial goal. It's about teaching children and grandchildren to give, creating a legacy of values and impact. Can you help my listeners understand why intentional multi-generational DAF engagement can be so powerful and what role technology might play in supporting that?
Well, listen, multi-generational giving has been a hot topic in the advisory community for decades, right? A lot of people, giving happens to be one of those important elements of a financial plan, and it should be part of a financial plan that goes beyond the money and actually goes to the values, right? That people want to carry on, that they want to pass on to future generations. It's just unfortunate that most of the financial tools out there aren't set up to do it. I mean, when we designed Daffy, we actually really thought about that problem. We had a lot of our members coming to us saying, how can I teach my children about giving, my grandchildren? We give with our siblings, right? It's not just children, right? It's entire family groups. And so having the ability that to just do two simple things. One, when someone in your family is inspired to give, they see an organization, they see a cause that inspires them, providing a way for them to suggest it, to create that conversation, to actually talk about it. Everyone underestimates how powerful that dinner time conversation can be, but it's a big deal. And more importantly, for you as a fund, if you're a parent, if you're a grandparent, the ability that every time you make a decision to give, to actually have that information shared with your loved ones so that they can ask questions. I mean, I've done this myself with my family. I have Daffy for Families set up. And so when we make a donation, my wife and I, the kids see it. They get an alert on their devices. And by the way, it turns out with modern child rearing, getting an alert on their devices is a pretty big deal. That actually is a more effective than some other communication channels. But what it means is at dinner, they ask questions, why this organization or, oh, that's wonderful. I didn't realize that we supported this, or what else do we do? And it gives you a chance to talk to them, really meaningful. And I think that for most financial advisors, what they've realized is that when they pull in the family, when they pull in things like giving, that not only are ongoing things, right? It's not a one-time thing, an ongoing thing, but things that are that important, it really builds a stronger long-term relationship with the client.
Yeah, Adam, one of the things that we see is, families who have created private foundations, obviously very generous, wonderful thing to do if you've got the resources to be able to do that. But they don't always stop and think, would their children or grandchildren want to be responsible for a private foundation? They get to those generations, and a lot of the younger folks are not looking to be responsible for a private foundation, but yes, they do want to be philanthropic and they want to have an easy way to do that. Donor advised funds can fill that gap.
That's right. And there's a lot of good reasons to set up a foundation. Although, as you point out, it's not inexpensive and it comes with its share of work and support. I think the question really is the focus on giving, right? Is the focus just making sure that there is a pool of funds and an ongoing kind of support for giving every year to organizations that matter, that are kind of align with your values? Or is there really a need to set up a new organization? I mean, there are some cases where a new organization makes sense, especially if it's cause specific, et cetera. But in many cases, the donor advised fund effectively lets you outsource that back office, right? The donor advised fund is doing all this work for you, keeping up on what charities are legal and up to kind of regulatory standards, making it easy to fulfill those donations, making sure the money is invested properly and will grow over time. I mean, the truth is there's really a lot of work that foundations do that is duplicative with what donor advised funds do. And so, especially for families that may not have the resources where a foundation is generated, donor advised fund is a no brainer. But we're actually seeing people who have 7, 8, even 9 figures of wealth actually turn to donor advised funds just because there's such a useful mechanism to be able to have a system for your giving.
Adam, in the book, I refer to donor advised funds as a shared services model where you have access to all of the resources and all the professionals that a private foundation must have access to, but they have to hire each of those folks and make those decisions. Whereas you're sharing those services with other philanthropists, but you didn't have to pay full price. You get the access and you get the service.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then, I mean, the great thing about the donor advised fund sector as a whole is there's a lot of energy and investment going into it, right? Donor advised funds have now cleared over $250 billion. Most people seeing them going to not just a trillion, but trillions in the coming decades. And so in some ways, by leveraging the donor advised fund, you get to piggyback
That's right.
on all of that great investment, et cetera. I mean, it's not just Daffy. I mean, I have a whole team of engineers and designers who wake up every day thinking about how they can make it easier to give. I mean, our mission is to help people be more generous more often. And whether that's adding support for new capabilities like, donating crypto, or we just added private stock as an option, et cetera. And so we're always working, upgrading the app. Or if it's just simple things like I said, making sure that the money gets to the charity on time, and making sure that the charities that you're giving to actually are up to snuff in terms of their regulatory requirements. I think there's a lot of great reasons for everyone to have a donor advised fund.
Well, Adam, you mentioned your tech team. So let's shift gears just a little bit. One of the more intriguing features of Daffy is something that you call the Daffy campaign. And I understand that this is a fundraising tool built directly into the DAF platform. Can you tell my audience more about why you're building fundraising tools into a DAF and what this unlocks for donors and nonprofits alike?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we're very excited about Daffy campaigns. It's one of those features that really came from our members. Some of our best ideas tend to come from our members. And it turns out that, the great thing about software is it really isn't limited by what's been done in the past. I mean, I realize that if you get a donor advised fund with a Fidelity or a Schwab or a Vanguard, they're not going to give you this ability to run a matching campaign. But it turns out in the nonprofit sector, if you talk to most nonprofits, doing matching campaigns is one of the best ways to leverage your large donors to have impact, right? Instead of them writing a single large check, instead they can match donations, making all the other donors feel like they have more impact and pulling other people into the organization. And so, not surprisingly, we had a lot of members at DAFI who said why they were looking for more ways to give from a donor advised fund, right? That's why they have it, right? They want to give. And I mean, internet campaigns have been around for decades. It's not like a new idea. And so the idea of like, wait, why can't I just run a matching campaign for any organization where people come in and make a donation and then I match from my donor advised fund? And the answer is there's no good reason you can't do it. So we built it and we launched it. It's been very popular. We even had one member tell us they no longer want to make just donations. They actually want to only do matching campaigns because for them, the power is not just the money getting to the nonprofit, it's inspiring others to give
as well,
and bringing other people into that organization. And more nonprofits are reaching out to us and saying, well, how can we leverage DAF campaigns? And the truth is, they already have very likely donors who are using donor advised funds, right? And so moving some money to DAFI and running a matching campaign turns out to be a great way to leverage the supporters you already have to get more supporters for your cause.
That's right. And as you said, building even a bigger community of givers. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to go back to that sit down conversation that we had and share a little bit more about that. So we'll be right back.
If you're enjoying this conversation and want to learn more, the DAF Revolution is your practical guide to turning donor-advised funds into real impact. Packed with insights from over 120 experts, including today's guest, it covers philanthropy, finance, law, nonprofits, and technology. Get the DAF Revolution now on Amazon or wherever you buy your favorite books.
And we're back. Adam, when we sat down, you said something that really stuck with me, and I'd love for you to share your perspective with our listeners. You said, and you mentioned just before the break, that matching campaigns to donor advised funds is a better way for companies to encourage giving than traditional donor matching programs. And I just thought that there was something really profound in that. So beyond the donor, what about the company?
Yeah, well, we've actually gotten some exposure to this. DAFI actually has a product for workplaces. So there are actually both for-profit and nonprofit organizations where, just like having a 401k, where you let people put money aside for retirement in kind of a tax-advantaged way, right out of their paycheck. We have companies letting people put money aside for charity into a donor advised fund. I mean, if you're a new engineer at a company like OpenAI, they'll tell you that they have this benefit of the 401k, and then they also have DAFI for work. And they even match the money you put aside for charity every year. And that's a very familiar pattern for people these days. I mean, we've had 401ks for decades. But also it gets out of this idea, the problem with donation matching. Donation matching is a wonderful program, and I love that most companies do this. But let's all be honest, it's actually a lot of overhead. It's like expense tracking. It's like getting reimbursed. It's work. You're uploading receipts, et cetera. We actually have a feature in DAFI to generate the receipts that people can upload to these programs because we get so many requests. But it gets a little bit, in my opinion, too much distance between what really motivates people to give that inspiration in the moment that you see a cause. And campaigns are a way to really capture that moment, right? Most organizations, most companies, and a lot of nonprofits as well have these moments, whether it's during the holidays or a special time of year or an anniversary, where they actually specifically want to raise money. And in that moment, matching donations is a very powerful way to encourage people, especially if you've already encouraged people to put money aside for charity, right? That's the win-win, right? You've put the money aside, so you already have it to give. And then if I give right now, my money is going to go twice as far. That's just a very compelling proposition if your goal is to get people excited and giving and get their attention on a cause and an organization.
That's great. You had mentioned something earlier, and I'm sure it didn't pass my listeners by without making notice of it. Daffy's business model is different from many DAF sponsors. You're a membership-based DAF. What led you to that decision, and how do you think it changes the experience for your donors? Because I noticed that you mentioned your members, which a lot of folks don't mention that.
That's right. And actually, I've had other donor advised funds organizations actually mention that they noticed that, like, we notice you call the people who belong members. That's interesting. For us, the business model behind the donor advised fund was something that Alejandro and I spent a lot of time thinking about when we were founding Daffy. And that's because I have a personal belief. I've had a long career in technology, been involved with a lot of companies. I mean, as an angel investor, over 150 different companies. And I always tell founders the same thing, that in some ways your business model is destiny, right? If you're successful, you're going to hire more and more people who optimize what they're doing. They prioritize based on how the organization makes money. And one of the problems with the donor advised fund sector that we believe has been a fundamental limiter has been the business model, that they charge a percentage of assets. Now, that's fine for an investment manager, right? Vanguard wants to charge a percentage of assets. That's fine. They're managing money. But I think that for a donor advised fund, it has two problems. One is it tends to focus the existing institutions on dollars instead of people. Because the truth is, when you charge a percentage of assets, that $1 billion account really does bring in 1,000 times more money than the $1 million account. Like, not 10% more, not double, like 1,000 times, which is why you've seen more and more donor advised funds focus on the largest accounts when we really believe that they're for everyone. And of course, the second problem is that there's a little bit of a conflict of interest, right? If you have a $100,000 account with Fidelity, you're paying $600 a year, right? 0.6% plus whatever the investment costs are. But if you give $10,000 away, Fidelity's revenue goes down by 10%. And that's just a little bit of conflict that we were uncomfortable with. And so for Daffy, we looked at the nonprofit sector and said, you know what? Some of the most successful nonprofits out there are based on the membership model, right? The idea of continuing support. And so at Daffy, we based our entire business model this way. And we have different tiers of membership. Most of our members pay $3 a month. We're actually free to get started. If you have less than $100, you get it for free. Most of our members pay $3. We charge $5 for a family plan. And if you really are putting large amounts of stock or crypto aside for larger accounts, we do have a premium tier with custom portfolios at $20 a month. But we really love the membership model because it really aligns everyone involved with Daffy, not just the people who work for the organization or support it, but also all the members around this mission, which is really oriented around not just giving once, but giving through your life, right? Giving for decades. And it's one of the things personally that I love about the membership model, which is that, we really get to focus on how do we help people make giving something that they do on an ongoing basis. You support those organizations, you discover them not just once, but every year. And so that alignment of the business model with the product, the features, the value we provide, for me, that's how you build a sustainable organization and platform.
What I love is that, donor advised funds are so flexible and so vibrant that there's room for different models, and different donors who are looking for different services can find them. And that's the value of building something slightly different than everybody else. Before we wrap up, I do want to go back to another quote that's associated with you, and that you said that every nonprofit leader should have a DAF. Explain why you think, and what are they missing out if they don't have a DAF? What's missing?
Well, I think there's a couple things. But listen, I actually believe that everyone should have
Right.
a donor advised fund. I actually have the point of view that everyone should be putting something aside for those less fortunate than themselves, and the donor advised.
What about nonprofit leaders? I mean, everyone says, or lots of people say, hey, everybody would benefit from having a DAF. And I quite honestly agree with you on that. But there's not many folks who then turn that around and say, hey, nonprofit leaders, do you have a DAF? So what do you think that brings to the discussion?
Well, I think there's multiple reasons for nonprofit leaders to have a donor advised fund. And really, especially now in 2025, I think it's incredibly important. I mean, let's just start with the basics. I mean, donor advised funds are becoming a more and more important source of funding for a lot of organizations, to the point where if you as a nonprofit organization don't understand donor advised funds, you might not understand one of the biggest new sources of support for your organization. But I think that for a lot of nonprofit members, getting in that feeling of themselves putting money aside for charities, having that money, and then feeling the power that comes that when they're inspired to give, when something happens that matters, something happens in the world, something happens locally, or even something that their own organization is doing, having the power to have that money already put aside and available to give. I think it's easy to talk about. I mean, I teach it in my class, the power of planning for financial goals, of planning in general. It's a different thing with money to feel it. And so I'm very strong about this. I think if you are a leader in a nonprofit organization, there's no excuse. So, I mean, it takes minutes with Daffy, less to set up, and it doesn't matter the amount, right? It can be as small as putting aside, $10 a week, $25 a month, put a few $100s in it. But I think that nonprofit leaders would really benefit from it, and I think it will also change their thinking about recognizing how giving really feels from the other side. I mean, you and I both know, if you're in a for-profit company, it might be around sales. If you're in a nonprofit organization, fundraising might be about donations. But fundamentally, it's a little too easy to get disconnected from the experience of your organization, of the membership, of your donors. And I think nonprofit leaders who feel it themselves are more authentic and more innovative in terms of how to raise money for their organizations.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That's why in the DAF Revolution book, chapter 6 is specifically dedicated to nonprofit organizations and helping them understand how they work and what they can do to help inspire the advisors who are the donors to the donor advised funds. So Adam, I want to thank you for this thoughtful and engaging conversation. And thank you for your support of the DAF Revolution. It's really meant a great deal. Your work is making generosity more accessible to everyone. So keep up the great work. To our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow wherever you find your favorite podcasts and make sure you get your own copy of the DAF Revolution, available on Amazon or wherever you buy your favorite books. Until next time, I'm Ted Hart. This is the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF. And Adam, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me again, Ted.
You've been listening to the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF with Ted Hart. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you enjoy your favorite shows. And don't forget to pick up Ted's newest book, The DAF Revolution, available now on Amazon and at booksellers everywhere. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Nonprofit Coach.